If you've ever dreamed of becoming a stage manager but don't know where to start, you're in the right place.
My name is Claudia Lynch, and this is your half-hour call. Good evening, everyone. This is your half-hour call. Half hour, please. This evening, you'll be speaking with Claudia Lynch about stage managing. Half hour.
Alrighty, folks, welcome back to this week's half-hour call. Today we are talking with Claudia Lynch. Claudia is the professor and coordinator of the stage management program at the University of Central Florida, which is where I went to school, and she has been a stage manager for 27 years. 22 of those years were spent in New York City, and 18 of those as a member of Actors Equity Association. She's worked on Broadway shows like Rock of Ages, the 2006 revival of Company, Little Shop of Horrors, Light in the Piazza, and that's just naming a few of her amazing credits. She's also a great friend and mentor and is pretty much the reason why this exists in the first place. So if you hate these videos, it's her fault. But also if you love these videos, it's her fault. So it's so great to have you here, Claudia. Thank you so much for joining me.
Thanks, Kent. I'm very happy to be here.
Before we get started talking about BFA interviews and college programs and everything, I just wanted to acknowledge how funny it is that we're talking about these BFA stage management programs, but neither of us have a BFA in stage management.
Exactly. And I have to hold like two different ideas in my head at the same time. I think that we have a phenomenal program at UCF. I really do believe in a lot of the BFA or MFA, the stage management programs that are around the country. I think it's a great way to learn to be a stage manager now in 2020, which is ironic that I say that, I know, but it is in these times, it's a great way. But 25 years ago, 27 years ago, when I started college, there weren't as many BFA programs. I wasn't planning to be a stage manager when I started, but I jumped into it with both feet. And so I have a BA in theater, in general theater, from SUNY Geneseo in New York. And one of the great things about what I was able to experience in college was just that they gave us, the professors there were amazing, and they gave us the opportunity to just try things without really having an idea. There was nobody there who said, this is how you stage manage. Instead, they said, here, why don't you try it? Here's the information we can get you about standard practices, but just try things and see what works, right? Which is the best thing ever. And then you have an entirely different experience, right?
Right. I have a BFA in musical theater, which I don't think I've actually talked about yet on this channel, which is funny.
Yeah.
But I took just two classes and then an independent study with you, which really kind of gave me a foundation of how to think as a stage manager. And then everything else that I've learned is just from on-the-job experience and working with the awesome stage managers through UCF and through those programs, and having an amazing network to be able to call out to when I need help in tricky situations that I might have learned about if I had actually had a BFA in stage management.
And you are an amazing stage manager, Ken, right? And I knew that just being in the classes. So really, we only got to talk theory, right, together when you were in my classes. But I knew that you were going to be able to put it into practice. And that doesn't negate the fact that I think it's really important and really a great way to learn to be a stage manager by the people who do spend 3 and 4 years with a BFA. Not everyone can just take 2 or 3 classes in theory and then be able to put it into practice the way you can. But there's also no one way to become a stage manager, right? Which is one of my takeaways is, even though I have this program that I am so passionate about, there is not just one way to become a stage manager.
I think that leads us really beautifully into our first question is what was your journey to stage management as a viable career? And at what point did you realize that you would make a good stage manager? Since, kind of like me, it sounds like you didn't really go into college knowing that that's what you wanted to do, but then sort of stumbled upon it along the way.
Yeah, so we were talking about dating, that I date myself as a stage manager for 27 years ago, which is 27 to 28 years ago, which is my senior year of high school into my freshman year of college. Because like everyone else, probably, like most people in the theater these days, I started out as a performer. From the time I was 7 years old, I would do the performing arts camp, and I would be an ensemble member. I was a postulant in The Sound of Music 3 times before the age of 12, right? But when I was 16, I was in a production of Paris of Penzance in my high school. And I remember looking around and knowing everybody else is blocking and knowing, like, being able to have an idea of everything that was supposed to happen. And I had this idea. I actually said out loud to myself, if I could sing with a capital S or act with a capital A, right? Like, if this was something that was in my skill set, I would like to do this for a living. Like, this idea of being in the theater is something that I know I love, but I know I'm not a performer with a capital. And so, oh well, I guess there's other things that I can do, right? But then I wasn't cast in a show in my senior year, and instead was asked to be the assistant director, but like run the rehearsals basically, while our director wasn't able to be at rehearsals. And really, I did a combination of assistant directing and stage managing, or really what I did was what I now know as a Broadway stage manager was really stage managing, PSMing. So that's how I started out. And then the summer after my senior year of high school, I ran around with a community theater company, and we would put stuff in my van, my Toyota minivan, and we would go to parks all around Orange County, New York, and we would do children's theater outside in the park. And I was their stage manager. And so walking into school, I was actually a comparative literature major, with French was going to be my foreign language. And I walked into the theater department and said, how can I get involved, right? And so by October, I was a theater major and was like, oh, wait a second. This idea of being a stage manager, this idea of working in theater, I can actually do that. Oh, this is for me. So it was like, I didn't plan for it, but a month into my freshman year, I knew what I was doing for the rest of my life.
That's so, when you said that you were doing shows, but you found you knew everyone's blocking, I think that's so funny, because when I was in high school, whenever someone dropped out of a play, they would just be like, oh, Kent can do it, if I'm not already on stage at the same time.
Exactly.
That's so funny that it's so similar.
Blocking lines,
but
too, right? Like, that's what I found with stage managers. We not only know all everybody else is blocking, but we know all their lines as well, and can start from the top of the show and say, and like, do the entire show and everybody. So somehow, if you can have all of that in your head at the same time, go for it. Be a stage manager.
Are there any other qualities that would make a good stage manager? So someone that looks into themselves and might want to do this, or someone that's never heard of it and is just stumbling upon this channel for the first time, what kind of things make good stage managers without necessarily having stage management training per se?
Yeah, and that's the question, isn't it? That's like the biggest question of being a stage manager. So you're going to hear a lot of things like be organized. And yes, sure, except that I'm not an organized person really whatsoever. And anyone who's ever walked into my office knows that. But I can organize other people, and I can organize things, and I can keep track of information and funnel information into the right areas of the people who need it. And I can pass on information, and I can get a group of people and gather them together and point them all in the same direction, right? So as a stage manager, I don't ever claim to be organized, but I know how to organize, right? As a stage manager, you need to be able to have the ability to keep notes or to keep information in your head. I'm actually not a very great note taker, although of course I've learned over the course of my career. My skill was that I had a very good memory and could keep a lot of information in my head at the tips of my fingers, like tips of my head, so that I could pass it on. You have to, as a stage manager, you have to be able to, what's the word? Sometimes I try to say that you have to not have an ego, which is total lie, because every stage manager I know has an ego, right? But you have to be able to not make things about yourself, right? It's never about you, right? That's my phrase that I say to my students all the time. It's never about you. And while you can be, have an ego in the best way, which means that you can be confident in yourself and in your abilities and know that you have value and know that your voice has value, but you know that because you are so confident in your abilities and so intrinsically know that your voice has value, you also know when it's not time to give your own opinions. And you can offer information, you can offer suggestions when it's needed, but also step back and let somebody else's vision run. And really, that's what we talk about in my stage management classes all the time, is you have to buy into somebody else's vision, right? And put your support and your efforts and your drive behind someone else's artistic vision, and have an artistic opinion, but all of your work goes towards supporting other people's visions, right? And you can only support other people's visions by having your own artistic opinion. But it's not about what you would choose. It's about what the director chooses, what the designers choose, and making what the actors choose, and making that work, right? So having that ability to put aside your own thoughts and feelings and put your drive behind someone else's is one of the biggest things you need to do as a stage manager.
That's such a good point. It's not about you also kind of refers to like why you are getting into theater in the first place. Because I feel like the best stage managers know that it's about the art and not about like yourself within the art. It's about what you're creating together as a company.
Exactly. And that's not just stage managers, everyone in the theater, like you just said.
Right.
This is a collaborative art. This is not a solo art. And if you want to be a solo artist, there are other mediums that you can use to express yourself. But the theater is not one of them. It is never about one solo vision in the theater. It is about the collaboration.
So I know a lot of parents are, when their kid comes to them and says, I want to study theater, I want to get my BFA in stage management, they might have some qualms about letting their kids do that. What are some other careers that could benefit from a BFA in stage management, whether that's within the theater or completely outside of the theater?
Ooh, that is such a great question. And I actually just got a message from a former student that Joy is currently working in operations as an office manager and HR, human resources specialist, at a social impact tech startup called GiveWith. Right? So I actually went, just before this interview, of course, at the last minute, I should have played ahead. I went out and reached out to a bunch of former students who have gone a slightly different path than specifically as an equity stage manager, and asked them if I could talk about what they've done. And so Joy actually just answered that question. And there's quite a few, right? I have quite a few former students who have gone in different directions. And I always say that I'm sufficiently biased that I think the training you get as an equity stage manager or as a student stage manager, with the idea focusing on the craft of an equity stage manager and the art of an equity stage manager, it is the best training that can go to anything else. So I have one of my roommates from college and my dearest friends, and she was a stage manager in college with me. She works in development, and so she is basically a fundraiser for Playwrights Horizons in New York. Another of my dearest friends who was a stage manager in college with me, she is the vice president of marketing for Dodger Theatricals. Right. I have a friend who is a stage manager with us, and he became a lawyer. And so there's so many other places you can go, and you basically, when you think about it, when you're learning stage management, you're learning project management, you're learning deadlines, you're learning communication, you're learning conflict solving, you're learning how to be a collaborator, and that's what management is in any area that you think of. If you want to go into any of the world outside of theater, if you have a background in management, that can only help.
That's such the soft skills that you learn as a stage manager are so applicable to everything. It's just the how to write blocking notation and the technical skills, the stuff that I talk about on this channel, that's not really applicable to other career paths.
And the truth is that if you're going to study stage management in college, the soft skills should be what the focus is. Because the craft skills, I don't need 4 years to teach you the craft skills, right? And the craft skills are about answering questions, right? It's a series of questions if you ask yourself and decide what you're going to do production by production, show by show. It's not a series of instructions, right? Stage managing is not about instructions. It's about questions you ask yourself and decisions you make. So the craft that I teach and the craft that I use when I'm working as a stage manager, of course there's things that I believe that, oh, do it this way and it works the best, because I've developed that over the course of 20 something years. But there's no such thing as do it this way. It's what do you need to do? Ask yourself these things to make a decision.
The questions that you ask yourself I always find myself asking the same questions, even if it's the same questions, they have different answers. Right. And that's.
And I will say that I love this series, right? I love that you're doing this series. And I think you do a really good job at, when you're talking craft, you're not giving instructions on do it this way. You're giving them the questions you ask yourself when you're trying to approach that part of the craft, right? So I am so proud. I think this is amazing.
Thank you so much. So once someone decides that they want to have their BFA in stage management and they want to start looking into programs, what's the interview process like? Because I know it's not the same as a normal college application. I mean, you have to do the college application too, but there's other steps. What's that? I didn't go through it, so I don't even know really what the process is like.
All right, so I'll talk about specifically at UCF, and I actually realized I love the fact that you wear your Theater UCF jacket for these. I don't have mine with me. It's in my office, of all things. So, but I do have my Arts at UCF sticker, and I have my UCF Stage Managers sticker that I made on a whim when we started this quarantine because I was missing everyone. And I mean to give them out to all the students and alumni, so you'll get one of these. And I even have my What Would Claudia Do bag that my students made.
That is amazing.
That's my swag that I'm wearing while we talk. So at UCF, there's a couple ways to do it. One is we will hold a general interview audition dates, usually 2 different weekends, Saturdays in February, March of every year. And students can sign up for an interview slot. They are given a morning session or an afternoon session. And then they show up at UCF and, they get to sit in a room with current students. And we actually will interview as much as we can. We interview the Design and Technology BFA program and the Stage Management BFA program together, although they are 2 separate majors, but they are majors that overlap a lot and overlap faculty. So we will, if we can, we will interview together. However, I'm happy to say that I've had so many people interviewing over the last couple of years for UCF that we have split up. So I was interviewing the Stage Manager program and the Design Tech program was interviewing separately because we needed to do it to get through everyone. And what we'll do is we ask them to come in and bring in a portfolio, or for a stage manager, what's a portfolio, right? Well, it's examples of any work that you've done as a stage manager. Yeah. So bring something like that in. What is your experience as a stage manager so far? What have you done? And is there any sort of paperwork or any sort of things that you've used as a high school stage manager, as a college stage manager, if you're transferring in, just to give me an idea of where you are in terms of your understanding of the craft of stage management. Now, what I'm very clear about to all the students who interview with me is that I'm not looking for you to know how to be a stage manager. That's what you're supposed to get by coming to UCF, by coming to a BFA Stage Manager program. I don't need you to know everything. What I'm looking for is just that to be able to understand what you know about stage managing, so I can just have that context in mind, because I didn't know a thing. I barely knew what a stage manager was when I started college. And then once I know just general background about what do you have an idea of the concept of stage managing, then I want to know, look for the skills that you need to have. Look for, I'm looking for someone who has the ability to look around and say, what should I do in this moment? I'm not as interested in finding someone who can follow instructions that somebody else gave them. Right? Now, sure, we all need to follow instructions sometimes, but I'm looking for the person who didn't have anybody tell them how to do something, didn't quite know how to do something in a rehearsal, and then said, but I have to figure out this thing, so let me figure it out. I have to figure out how to keep track of them blocking, and they're standing on a floor that has squares in it. So I'm going to draw the squares in my book and just keep track of them. I'm looking for someone who said, hey, we needed to figure out how to do this. And I don't know if this is right, but I figured this out, right? And what I always look for that, because one of my other catchphrase is, don't ask, you never ask, is this right? You ask, did it work, right? Did it work? Did it work, and would you do it again? Did it work, and but you would choose something else the next time, right? Sometimes it worked and you would do it again. Sometimes it worked, but you wouldn't do it that way again. Sometimes it didn't work, but it was still the right thing to do and you'd try it again later on, right? There's so many ways of looking at it. So that's what I'm looking for. As a high school, as a transfer stage manager, I'm just looking for somebody who has looked around and said, let me figure something out. Let me figure out how to make this work. Yeah. So in order to do that, to finish up my thought, when we have those big group interviews, because we ask them to come and sit in a room and wait while we interview each person, we will set up backstage tours of all of the theater and all of the areas at UCF. And we will have a bunch of volunteer stage managers and design tech majors who come and sit with them in a room and talk to them and give them the down low on all of the information they need to know from a student perspective. So they really actually get more time hanging out with students than they do with me on those interview days. But I think it really works well for them to get more information than what I can give them from my point of view. But not everybody can come to Florida, come to Orlando in February to do the big marathon day. So I also offer Zoom interviews, Skype interviews, FaceTime interviews. I actually offer the option of any student who's interested in the BFA Stage Management Program at UCF. I invite them to come at any time and join us on campus and come to my classes. And then I set them up with current students so they get a tour of UCF specifically from the stage managers. So I often will do more interviews, and then I actually don't stop the interview process. So I may offer all of the spots in the BFA Stage Management Program out in March, right? So next year, in March 2021, I may offer all of the spots for the BFA Stage Management Program. But I know that by the time we start classes in August, not everyone may accept the spot. Different things might happen. So I actually never stop the interview process. I'm just very clear that if they interview after March, then they're not starting from to be in the pool of people where all of the spots are available. They're starting from, if there's a spot open, maybe you would be on the list, right? But I do think it's really important to never turn around and say, well, it's too late, right? Because it's not too late. I might have a spot open, so I'm going to keep the interviews going.
I know the musical theater program at UCF has an alternate list where they'll basically kind of not accept, but put another full class of people in an alternate list. And there have been years where they've gone through that whole list. Right. So the idea that it's never too late is so very true, especially when things move as fast as they do in those few months before school starts.
Yeah.
You kind of already answered this question, but what are some of the questions that prospective students can anticipate in the interview? If there's any specific, like, this question I always ask of everybody, no matter what their understanding of stage management is.
I do. The one question I try to make sure I ask all the time is the one that you will probably get as a stage manager for the rest of their lives, right? Is, tell me about a time when something went wrong and how you handled it, right? Because most of the time, genius comes from failure, right? And that's really what I'm looking for, is when has something gone wrong and you had to be able to figure it out. And most of the time I get amazing and wonderful stories that show off. That's the skill that I'm looking for, the primary skill I'm looking for. I also ask what hobbies they have outside of stage management, outside of the theater, because another thing that I like to say all the time is, be a person first and a stage manager second, right? If your entire identity is wrapped up as you as a stage manager, first of all, it's not a good way to live. Second of all, when things like this happen, in this, what we are calling the great pause, what do you do if your entire identity is wrapped up in your work, right? And you are a better artist. You're a better theatrical artist the more well-rounded person you are. And so I joke about this, and some of my former students have come in and said, the theater is my life. And I'm going to wear black every day. And I'm going to look like a stage manager and stage managing is my life. And my first instruction to them is get a life. Get a life outside of the theater. Get a life outside of stage management. You have to have something outside that you love. You have to have another passion. And that will be able to bring it back into the rehearsal room, and you will be a more valuable member of the team, of the collaboration. So so I ask about hobbies. I ask about things. I ask if they are, what shows they've seen, if they've been an audience member. The best way to be a theater artist is to see as much theater as possible, right? And I have never been actually very good at that. I didn't see all that much theater before I started in this business. I was more working on shows than got to see them. I grew up 60 miles outside of Manhattan, an hour outside of the city. And I did not see my first Broadway show until I was a sophomore in college, right? I never went to New York to see a Broadway show because I was too busy doing shows, right? But how does that make any sense whatsoever, right? So this is a do as I say, not as I do kind of thing, where like, go see theater. That's the best way to be a theater artist. Yeah, I think I'm trying to think that those are the big ones that I ask. And then I'll ask sometimes I will ask things if somebody's too nervous, I will try to ask them things just to get them on a rhythm of talking. If somebody's too focused, I try to ask them about outside interests. If someone's too polite, I try to get them to break that barrier. There is a formality and there's a politeness, and absolutely, but as a collaborator in theater, you have to be able to communicate with someone in a way that makes them want to work with you, in a way that makes them feel that you know them and they know you. And so that's what you'll hear the phrase that in order to get a job in the theater, you want to be the person that they want to go have a beer with, right? Well, I don't drink. So what I like to think about it though is you want to be the person that they want to have a conversation with you about life and about real things, and be a person that they can connect with. And so there's a little bit of a formality or a nervousness that some people come into an interview situation. And sometimes I will try to find that connection to get them to relax and be a little bit more of what they would be like with their friends. Yeah. I think that I'm trying to come up with other things, but that's basically what I'm looking at when I do an interview.
Yeah. I just want to point out that the seeing theater question is talking about how important that is. That's at the end of every single video. I list 3 ways to support this channel, and one of them is go see live theater at a regional equity house or a Broadway show if you're in the area. And I could not agree with that more.
Exactly.
But the other 2, really, it sounds like they could answer those questions whether they've been a formal stage manager in a high school show or not, which I think really wonderfully leads us right into the next question, which is what do you suggest people do that are interested in this career path, that are interested in getting a BFA in stage management, that might not have the same resources to be able to participate, like their high school doesn't have a theater program, or they can't afford the pay-to-play outside of school training and stuff like that, because anyone can talk about something that's gone wrong and what their hobbies are. But in terms of the other things you were talking about, where you say bring a sample, like what kinds of things could they do to illustrate that they are right for the program if they haven't had those same opportunities?
And so the answer is I definitely have had plenty. Maybe plenty is not the word. I've had students who have interviewed for the program who really don't have a lot of theater background. And that's okay. If you have, like, most likely, if they're interested in stage management, they've had a job or another volunteer opportunity or something, some experience where they were managing a group of people, where they were communicating information, where they were organizing an event. And organizing stuff is a good aspect to have, but more about organizing people is what is even more so what I'm looking for. So, and I found that even the people that don't really have any experience in theater have had that. That's why they're drawn to being a stage manager, even if they don't really know what a stage manager is, because they have that experience as a manager. I even had one student who ultimately decided that the stage managing is not what she wanted to do. And I was very, I absolutely agreed with her and agreed with the direction she went in. But when she interviewed for the program, she said, I don't know what a stage manager does. So I went online and I looked it up. And I didn't have a portfolio because I've never been a stage manager. I didn't have a prompt book to show you, but I figured I had to show you something. So I went online and I found out what paperwork stage managers do, and I made examples as if I was doing a show. Brilliant, right? Like, absolutely. That I didn't care that she didn't have any experience. She had exactly the right mindset of, I'm going to learn about this. And so what we ultimately decided was that she was going to take the stage management classes and not necessarily be in the BFA program, but we have a BA in theater studies at UCF, that she was going to be able to get her degree in theater and learn about stage management, but also she learned a lot about front house management. There was so many different directions she could go with that experience. And it didn't matter that she didn't have that background. Right. And she had actually had a background where she I think she was an office manager for a doctor's office, right? Like, she had the management experience that I was looking for. So now let me flip it. If you don't have experience in theater, it doesn't mean you can't be in the theater, right? What I say is, if you have the instinct, if you have the skill set and you have the drive, I can teach the craft. But at the same time, the reason that people come into programs and they're looking for what experience do you have in the theater is because in the theater, we speak a specific language, right? And in many crafts, in many areas, there'll be a language or knowledge that you need to know. And within the theater, it's about, do you understand? Do you have that language? And the more you have a background in theater, the more that you have that base that then can be built upon, right, in a stage management program. And I'm going to be perfectly honest. There's plenty of people who might decide to audition for the musical theater program or the acting program, even if they don't have a background, because they know they love to perform. And they can enter it and they can do it. And there are realities of how tough it is to be a performer in this business. But the fact that they don't have a background in theater may not be an issue, right? As a stage manager, I love this field. I love this craft. I have never regretted being a stage manager. But at the same time, this is a hell of a business. And why would somebody choose to do this? Why in the world? When you think about it, when you think about what we do as stage managers, why would somebody choose that, right? And so I have students who have come in and been a stage manager in high school and don't really have an idea of what an equity stage manager does, but have at least some idea. And even they have come in and said, oh, wait a second, now that I know what it is professionally, I'm not sure this is what I want to do. But then there's the people who come in, if they have no background in theater, then it's like the reality is of what you do as a stage manager. It's a lot, right? And there might be people who say, great, wonderful, but not for me. So I think I've lost my train of thought. Where were we on this? I don't even know what we were talking about.
We were talking about folks that don't have access to those resources, but you answered that question. It's watch half hour call and do examples of the paperwork that I show you how to do. Yeah. And really, I've also had people show up without a prompt script and say, I'm sorry, I don't have one. And I've said, that's okay. Let's talk. I really don't. It's not here's what I like to say. Stage management is not about paperwork. We do have paperwork, and you have to be good at it. And you have to, if you are interested in paperwork, watch the document design half-hour call that Kent did, because it's exactly the questions you have to ask yourself when you're doing paperwork. But
it's not about the paperwork, right? It's about being
Right.
on your feet. It's about the collaboration. It's about how you're communicating. And so if you don't have that experience as you're going into a BFA program, it doesn't matter. That's what you're going to get when you get out of school, not what you have when you come in.
If you have to know how to do the job before you can learn how to do the job, then that's a pretty terrible program.
What the hell are you paying for? Yeah, exactly.
Right. But when you were talking about the process to interview at UCF, what I really loved is how much time that they get to spend either in the classes or with current students. And I feel like, at least when I was auditioning for performing degrees and for performing programs, everyone said you're auditioning the school just as much as they're auditioning you. Yes. So in this case, it seems like they're interviewing this program and you just as much as you're interviewing them to figure out what the right fit is. So what should people consider when deciding what kind of program, because there's so many now that they exist, there's so many BFA stage management programs all over the country, which is wonderful, but it can probably be really overwhelming to know where to look first. When you're getting down to it, how do you pick which program to take, which program to join?
Oh, okay. So there's so many things, and I'm going to preface this by saying these are my opinions, right? And the maybe the biggest thing that you should take away from this is it has to be the right program for you, and that's going to mean a bunch of different things, but the right program for me doesn't mean it's the right program for you, and find what works for you. So I have so many feelings, as to quote Maddie DiCarlo, and I have opinions, and so these are mine. The first thing is money. I'm going to be perfectly honest with you. I don't believe in going into debt to be a stage manager. Here's right where we talk about what are we doing in the theater to make sure that we are represented with a diverse voices, and not just people with privilege, and not just white people, and not just, right, like there's such a problem in the theater today, and it's something that we can solve if we make sure that the access is available, and money is a big part of it. I am in this business because I had parents who were able to support me in college and then when I was starting out. And they said to me, I had offers for scholarship offers for private schools. And they said to me, you can go to the private school, you probably have to have a job, and maybe we have to get some loans. Or you could go to the state school and you can go out without any debt, right? Be able to graduate without debt. Because my parents made that sacrifice, and they had the ability, they had the resources to be able to do that for me. So I chose the state school to make sure I started out without any debt. I know that that's hard to do these days. Most of my students cannot graduate without debt, even at a state school, which we are in Florida. And that's going to be a major roadblock in getting into this business, because we are still in this world of hiring PAs for not full-time, for not even minimum wage. And we're still in this world of doing unpaid internships. And we need to change that. But in the meantime, I want, if possible, my students to be able to get through with as little debt as possible in order to start. And so for instance, our program at UCF is mostly people from Florida because it is a Florida state school. And I'm going to be perfectly honest, I think that we have a great program, and I'm very happy to talk to students from all over the country about UCF, and maybe it will be the right program for them. But the tuition rate for out-of-state students is wildly higher than in-state. And UCF is a wonderful in-state school and I think you go to a state school. And I want you from anywhere, whoever you are around the country, I want you to come to UCF if you want to study with me. But I also know that it will cost you more money than the people in state in Florida. And I understand that might be a problem, right? Okay, so then here's my big thing. And I'm learning how to teach, right? I fell into this in June and July of 2014. I was working at New York City Center Encores. I was actually doing Tick, Tick, Boom with Lin-Manuel Miranda and Leslie Odom Jr. and Karen Olivo. And I was realizing that maybe I wanted to leave New York and maybe I wanted to change. And I was turning 40 and I was like, I want something different. And I found this like Facebook post that said they were looking for a stage manager to teach stage managers at UCF. And I fell into becoming a professor, right? And I'm learning how to teach, and I'm learning about assessment, and I'm learning about the best ways to communicate what I know to people who are coming in who don't know it yet. But all that being said, I don't believe in tests. You know, from being in my classes, there is no such thing as a test, right? As a stage manager, like, why am I testing you on information? Instead, it's project-based, right? I'm putting you into situations for you to try things out within this craft, but I don't know that I have a single thing that I believe is best taught in the stage management world by having you like answer test questions, right? But again, that's just my theory. But so my theory is that, well, actually, my theory is that it's not about theory. Or you can talk about theory all day long, but it's about putting that theory into practice. And so whatever program you go for, make sure that there's enough theory classes to be able to explore everything you need to explore, but that you get to actually be a stage manager, right? And when I say stage manager, I mean every part of the stage management team. So at UCF, you're going to start out and you're going to be a production assistant. And then you're going to be an ASM, and then you're going to be a stage manager, and then you might jump back and be an ASM again, and then you're going to do every part of the job, and you're going to work in teams for every show you do. There's never going to be a show where you're just the single stage manager, because I believe stage management is too big for one person. It needs teams, right? ASM's on every contract. So I think that looking for a program that you have the time to explore in a classroom and then you have the time to explore in a production is the most important, one of the more important things of figuring that out. And I mean, I have a big program, right? There's between 30 and 40 stage managers at UCF, right, each year. But we do enough shows and we do teams, so every stage manager has an assignment every semester, right? You come out of the program at UCF with really having experience putting that theory into practice. But we also have a stage manager class every single semester, right? And in addition to a stage manager class that is every single semester, and then there's 5 other stage management classes that are really about theory, right? So I don't know that I would choose a program that only has one stage management class and then call it a BFA stage management program, right? So I think really having that classroom time as well as that production time is important. And when I say all this, I'm not pointing out other programs. I love talking to other stage management educators. In fact, we're going to have a meeting coming soon where we talk about what we do in each program and we get ideas from each other. So there's so many options out there. It's so great. Being comfortable in the program, making sure that you're represented, making sure that you feel comfortable with the professors, all of the professors you're going to interact with. That is the one thing that you don't get at UCF, because we interview separate from the performing programs. They don't get to meet the acting professor they're going to work with, right? But you can't meet everybody. You have to be able to at least get a representation when you go and interview. If they allow you to come take a class for the day or take classes and follow a current student, right, I think that's the best way, and that's what I offer constantly, because then you do get to go to the acting class and you do get to be able to really see the program from the other student's point of view.
So with the whole trying not to go into debt as much as possible, or choosing the cheaper option, that'll also then set you up to be able to take internships and things, so you can get even more life experience outside of the job, outside of the school, which I think is also really valuable.
Yeah, so we can go into that. That what I also tell the students at UCF is that getting the BFA in stage management, getting as much experience as they can at UCF, qualifies them to PA, right? And from that point of view of as a professional stage manager, it's not possible to finish out their education. I can do everything I can in the educational theater situation we're in, but then they're going to have to go, and this is an apprentice-based craft still. And so you really need to go be an apprentice. You need to go and work for the people that you want their jobs in 10 years, right? Go be in the room where it happens with the people who are doing this professionally, instead of going to be in the room where they're hiring you at 21 to be the PSM, right? Again, this is my opinion. And it's not like there are plenty of people who have gone and worked for a company that hires them right out of school, and then they end up in a great place. And I'm not saying that it's impossible to do it that way, but my opinion is to go and be the PA and be in the room and work with the professionals that have been doing this for a while, and that will give you the connections and give you the finish out your training in order to be a professional. And you need that on the job training, and you need the legitimacy. So here's the problem in the theater, is that we both want to make sure there's access to new voices, and we also vet people. We have to know that you're legit. We have to know you have some sort of training, and we have to know you have that language of theater. And the way that at this point that works is when they say it's about who you know in the theater, that's what they mean, is that we look at how many degrees of separation is there between you and me if I'm going to try to hire you, so that there's a legitimacy to your background and to your training. Now, because we're such a collaborative environment and we're on such short deadlines, that you need to know that the person you're hiring has the ability and has the collaborative experience and can be a collaborator and be in the room with you. So that's why we play that game of who do you know that I know, or where have you worked that I've worked, or to make that legitimacy to who you are. And that's where we have to both be able to do that, but also offer that training to people so they get the legitimacy and offer the access to new voices, right? And so that's where I think that we who are educators, that's our job, is to make sure we're getting as many students into the system that have different backgrounds and different voices, so that they get that training and legitimacy, so that then they can start their professional careers. Now, you don't have to go to school to be a stage manager, right? You don't have to. This is still one career that nobody actually cares about your degree, right? So you don't have to go to college to be in theater. It's just a path that gives you that access. So as much as I understand the problem to saying this, choosing the right program also means getting the access. And so who are you going to be studying with, and how are they going to be able to help you start your network, right? If you want to be a Broadway stage manager, you're going to want to do internships where the people who are coming out of New York are going for their summer, right, theater, and be able to meet people who are living in New York. So while this is a small business, and so anything can happen, going to a small theater on the other side of the country won't necessarily get you the contacts you want in New York. Same the other way around. If your plan is to go to Seattle, then to go to a small theater company in the Berkshires, you might meet someone in the Seattle community, but you might not, because they might not have crossed the country for their summer. So really looking at both for a theater program you're looking at, both for your internships when you're starting out, or your PA positions, or your entry level stage management positions, looking at the world you think you want to go in, and then are you going to be working with those people, is something you have to ask yourself. But I don't know if this, I'm going to go one more tangent. If you know where you want to go, then try to take steps, be aware of that as you take steps to get where you want to go. But also be open to where your career can take you, right? Because you never know when getting that internship in Ohio is actually going to make you the connection you need to get your first job in New York, right? And I'm very, I like to talk to my students about what do you want in your life as a whole person, not just in your career. Because I have had a wonderful career. I have a wonderful new career that I've flipped a little. And I think that I don't have a lot of regrets in my life. But when I was 21, I thought that by the time I was 45, I would have 10 kids and be living in like a rural area in a farmhouse, right? And no one told me that the path I was going on career-wise wasn't necessarily going to support that other dream. I don't regret that where I am today, but I also didn't go in a direction that helped support that part of what I wanted in my life. So looking at the whole, what you want as a whole person, not just what you're on in your career, but also opening yourself up to what might happen. I can go on, but I'll stop there for a second.
I think a lot of stage managers and a lot of people in this entire industry are discovering, like what you were saying about defining your self-worth through your job or through your stage management or through theater as a whole. What happens when it stops for 5 months and counting? You know, like what's gonna happen to who you are as a person if what you define yourself as disappears? I think that's a lot of people I feel like are realizing that they did not take the advice that they didn't know they needed until they found out that they should have been taking that advice.
Well, and exactly what you're doing right now, right? With Half Hour Call, you're taking your interest and in this pause, doing something else with it. But you also have a life, a whole life. And so you're able to keep going even if they're in this great pause, right? I wonder, you will hear people, if you think you're going to go into this business, you will hear people say to you, don't do it unless you can't think of anything else that you can do. And I can't tell you, almost everybody you ever talk to is going to say that, right? I've heard that so many times, but I'm going to flip it. I think I was successful in my career because I always felt like I had one foot out of the business. Almost every show I did, I was like, maybe this is my last show. Maybe I'll go do something else with my life. And I could think of, at any given point in my career, I could think of a bunch of other careers that I could do and be happy in. And I think that allowed me to not take myself too seriously, take this business too seriously. I absolutely loved my career and was blessed and had a fabulous time being a Broadway stage manager, but it wasn't the end of my ambition. And I knew that I could be happy other places, which I think made me happier when I was working, and made me happy to, once I fell into this idea of being a professor, made me happy to make a flip where I haven't gotten rid of being an equity stage manager. I am still an equity stage manager, but I'm certainly not a full-time equity stage manager anymore, right? I am a full-time educator now. And I was happy to do that flip because I always knew that I could do something else and be happy.
There's one of the books that you assigned to one of the classes with you that I took. There's a phrase that I highlighted and have kept near and dear to my heart. It says something like, if you're called to the theater, answer the call, and the theater will tell you where you can serve. So I feel like the people that know exactly what they want in the theater, it's almost like putting all of your eggs in one basket. If from what you're saying is like, I'm hedging my bets. I'm putting everything in this one basket. And then if that doesn't work out, I'm not going to be happy, as opposed to spreading it out. Even if everything you spread it out is within the theater, right? If you want to be a performer and a stage manager and a director and a writer and a whatever, you have other things to fall back on. Not saying that everyone needs a backup plan, because I don't like the use of that term, because that sounds like you should abandon your career, right. But having other avenues where you would still be happy. That's a really important thing to think about, especially when you're choosing a college major too, because if you might want to pick up a minor that lets you do the other thing that you would be happy doing.
Absolutely. And I do think that to go back on that, you might have multiple things within theater that you want to do or could do. You might have multiple things not like in the theater, and then outside of the theater, you have all kinds of ideas of things that you could do and be happy. I do think that picking something to study in college is a good thing. Now, there are programs that allow you to generalize, and I think that it has a lot of value. But even when within those programs that allow you to generalize, I think that most people tend to fall into what they do in college, right? I was in a BA theater program that did not make me pick what I did, but I fell into stage management and I loved it. And I got to try a bunch of other things, but I focused on being a stage manager. So one of the things like a BFA stage management program usually not just allows you, but actually makes you study every aspect of theater, right? If you're in a BFA stage management program, you are probably taking multiple acting classes and multiple directing classes and multiple design classes and multiple tech classes. And right, you're going to have to really study every aspect. So I think it's okay to specialize. And just because you end up with a BFA in stage management doesn't mean that you're not going to end up being a director. And just because you have a BFA in musical theater doesn't mean you're not going to end up being an equity stage manager, right? I think that specializing in college can then help you later on be able to broaden the aspects, because the more experience you get just in the room, in the theater world, makes you be able to learn more about everything. And then what I like to say is that when you go from high school to college, the amount of jobs that are in the theater that you didn't really know about, explode, right? And your freshman year of college is usually about, I didn't realize there were all these things in the theater that I could do for a living, right? But when you leave, even when you leave a BFA program, when you leave college and you go into the workforce, it will happen again. The amount of jobs there are out there in the world that are within the theater world, especially when you get to Broadway, right, are so big and so wide that you don't know about them when you're in high school. And whatever you choose to study in the college will probably allow you to end up there. So, if you want to be in development at Playwrights Horizons, if you want to be the vice president of marketing for Dodger Theatricals, stage managing is a great way to start that, right? So there's many producers and almost every general manager that I have ever worked with started out as a stage manager, right? And the general manager, especially in a Broadway setting, but the general manager is the person who's going to be hiring you as a stage manager. Right. And most of them have started out. And in fact, I also have a former student who is an amazing stage manager, and he decided to start an internship and then took a job with a general management firm and started in that path, right? There's so many options. It's just mind-blowing.
That's the concept of getting such a well-rounded but still specialized education is so valuable, because especially as stage managers, we have to know a little bit about everything. We have to know enough to have that dialogue with people and to understand why we should trust them to do their job.
Yes.
What I always think about.
Expert. In fact, you shouldn't be the expert on everything in the room, but you should know enough about everybody's job to allow them to give you the information they need or you need, and you should be able to ask the right questions and understand when how to help them get the time they need. That's what you need. You need an understanding of everybody else's job so you can help support their job.
So along those lines, it's once you've finally gotten into a program, you're there, you've figured out, where you're living, all of the things that are college related. What's the number one thing that people can do to make the most out of their program, out of those 4 years, out of the however many thousands of dollars they're spending to get this training? What's the most important thing that they can do that the program doesn't necessarily automatically do for you, like getting all those wide array of skills?
What is the rating? Should I keep this G-rated or?
I can bleep out whatever.
Okay, so my a joke that I share with my students, which started with other professional stage managers, is when instead of saying break a leg, we say don't f*** up, right? But the truth is, allow yourself to f*** up. That's where you want to be in school. Allow yourself to fail. Give yourself the grace and the courage and the peace to try new things and not be good at them, and then try them again. This is where it's about the process, not the product. If you're in an educational setting, nobody's going to do a New York Times review of your show. Nobody's going to lose their job if the show gets a bad review. It's okay to screw up. It's, in fact, like I said early on, I believe that genius comes from failure. So I think the most important thing you can do for yourself in an educational situation is allow yourself to fail and pick yourself up and say, that didn't work. What do I do next? And keep going. That was said to me through my performance degree as well. So I think it's just a common, this is your chance to mess up not without consequences, but without the long-lasting consequences that might happen. But even still, stage managers aren't robots. They're human beings. You can still make mistakes as a professional stage manager, and it's not going to ruin your career. I always say, like, I will never say that I don't make mistakes, but I try really hard never to make the same mistake twice. It's one of the things that I say all the time in phone interviews or whatever. And yet, I'm going to tell you, over the longer you do this, the longer you're going to actually make the same mistake twice or three times. Like, we are human, and we're going to fail at things. And I can't tell you how many times that I have screwed something up and then said, I knew not to do that, or I knew to make that step, or I didn't listen to my instincts, and then you're going to screw things up, and you're not going to be perfect. And being able to fail with grace and being able to acknowledge it, being able to say to someone, hey, that was me, I screwed that up, like, let me make this work. That's what you need to be able to do. And so, yes, in a don't fail your classes, right? Because you've just thrown money out of the window for no reason. But within the classes, allow yourself to fail and try again. And within the productions. And if I can get on my soapbox, I do believe as an educator that my job is to structure my classes to allow them to fail and not have that affect their grade. That the grade is about the tries, is about the attempts, not the success.
That's somewhere I still have the prompt book that I made in SM2. And I still look at the sticky notes for, like, this could be better, this could be better. And whenever I'm making that same type of document, I'll look at those sticky notes and go, okay, this is how I messed up that time, or this is how it wasn't as good as it could be. What do I need to think about, and what needs to be thought about for this specific show? And it's that environment is so freeing in a way that lets you make choices and do things that, like, especially for me coming in not as a BFA stage manager, I was able to kind of think about, I'm not stuck with, this is how we've always done it. I can go, like, what if we did it this way? And then we can talk about it instead of going, no, that's wrong, do it again, or no, that's wrong, you get an F, which I think is so wonderful. And that's such a gift to have during your education.
Yeah. In fact, I think those are to me, those are curse words are sacrilege to say we do this because this is the way we do it. No, absolutely not, ever, right? We're doing this because know why you're choosing something and making a decision, and be able to back it up. And back it up doesn't mean you dig in and say, I'm doing it no matter what. Back it up and this is why I made this choice, even if it doesn't work. I made this choice. I made a reasoned decision, and now I'm going to make the next decision based on the feedback I get.
That's such a valuable thing to get. Is there anything else you'd like to add for those that want a career in stage management, for their education, for their anything that we didn't already cover?
What have we covered? The this career is just, there's so many aspects to stage managing. It's an art, it's a craft, it's being middle management, it's having an opinion, an artistic opinion, it's in some ways burying or subsuming that opinion for somebody else's artistic opinion. There's great joy in it. There's great, there is frustration, there is rage, there is joy, there is sorrow, this career is just layered and complex, and but it's worth it.
Well, thank you so much for coming on the show today. I appreciate it. If you guys are interested in going to school at UCF or just want to read up on Claudia or the program itself, I'll put some links in the description and the comments about the program and how to get involved there. And please stick around. We're going to have another interview with Claudia coming out in about a week or so, and I am excited to have that one. Thank you so much. Have a great day, and this has been your half-hour call. Do you have a question or an idea for a video? If you do, send me an email at askhalfhourcall@gmail.com. That's askhalfhourcall@gmail.com.